a special edition of the Mind of Basketball podcast. I'm Evan.
I'm Ja.
And we are here today to discuss our Snub 25 list, or otherwise known the NBA Top 75 Snubs list. Mm-hmm. We worked on this list for, I think, 2 months, Ja?
Yeah. Actually, it's been a while.
And planned this few weeks before we released our new video.
Yeah, before we released our new video, it was like we already had. So basically, when the NBA did their top 75 list, that was kind of our idea. Going back to how
yes, they took it from us. Yeah, over the summer, we was like, the NBA is releasing this is their 75th season.
Exactly.
Because they just put out the logo. And that's how we got the idea. It's like, why don't we just make a top 75 best players list? Next thing you know, a few weeks later, they said, we're announcing our 75. Like, okay.
Yeah, we had to change some things up, and we decided to, the moment the list came out, instead of there's obviously controversy behind it, and, people want to always have talks and whispers about what players was left off and things like that. So we decided to choose 25, like top 25 players in NBA history that we felt like was left off the potential, who had the highest potential to be on the list, but yet for some whatever reason just was left off. And as a result, that's where the sub 25 just came about.
Yep. And the point of our sub 25 list was not to kick out anybody else from the list, not to say that this person is not deserving of this, this person is not deserving of this, and this person should be on the list. It was just to present our case for why this person should be in the discussion of the top 75 list. You as the watcher, or before I let you go, you as the viewer, you as a person watching our videos, is supposed to decide for yourself.
Exactly. And it's more like, for us also, is like we're bringing these, we're kind of like basically like re-glorifying these players back into light after, like, because again, there could be a whole lot of factors to why they was left off the list. Because again, this is people who past legends voted for these people to be on the list. Media members voted for these people to be on the list. So there was a lot of factors. And again, it's a whole, like, the NBA has been around for 75 years, literally 75 years. So a lot of players has came across. Obviously, again, you got your known brainers, but obviously you got the ones who are questionable, but yet we don't deny they deserve to still be on there. While you got the ones who was left off, because probably they were, as what we're going to get into this video, probably people forgot about them. Things like that. So it's just basically bringing them back into light.
Yeah, that's a big portion of why we also wanted to do this. Felt like a lot of people were left off because maybe they never really got their shine, even in their era. Overlooked, underrated, due to maybe other players in their era, injuries, just certain things going, anybody in the 70s, certain things going on in that time period. So, we just want to do this to help you guys figure out and learn more about these players.
Exactly.
But all right. Now, right before we go on to the content of the list, I'd like to say once again, thank you to everybody that's been supporting the list. Our TikTok has grown a lot due to this list, and I've seen a lot of likes and followers joining from this list and a lot of people commenting, and I really do appreciate all the support that we've gained. I appreciate all the questions that you asked in the comment sections, even some disagreements you might have, debates, some of them just kind of laughable, but most of them have been pretty really good. And so I'd like to thank all of you guys that's been supporting and appreciating and watching our content. Why are you laughing?
I'm thinking of the comment. LeBron's.
People are funny on TikTok. People are so funny. But yeah, I would like to thank all of you guys that have watched and followed due to our list, due to our videos. We really do appreciate all the support, and we'll hope to gain even more support over this next few months and years. Who knows? But okay. Now let's get on to the contents of the list. Our 25, which we then added 2 more because we realized, oh, this person should be on the list, this person should be on the list. And then we looked at the top 75 list and he said, well, there's 76 players on the list. And apparently, if reports are true, Kyrie was on the list and then he was taken off. So I think that's why we added those 2 players, kind of like mirror the NBA.
They just don't like Kyrie. That's it.
But yes, our 27 players were Dwight Howard, Vince Carter, Tracy McGrady, Chris Bosh, Pau Gasol, Tony Parker, Manu Ginobili, Klay Thompson, Alex English, Adrian Dantley, Bob Lanier, Dennis Johnson, Jojo White, Walt Bellamy, Bernard King, Paul George, Kyrie Irving, Dikembe Mutombo, Joe Dumars, Yao Ming, Sidney Moncrief, Chris Webber, Grant Hill, Chris Mullin, Alonzo Mourning, Ben Wallace, and Artis Gilmore. Those were the 27 players that we deemed had the right of being in discussion for the top 75 list. Those are the 27 players that we believe their resume stacked up, their impact and influence in the game, as well as what they did for their either respective era, their team. But those were the players that some of them we brought on the list for different reasons. So, one player like Yao Ming, for example, he didn't have a long career, right? And that's why I put that in my video, because I wanted to make sure that even though each player had a right reason, there was that one main reason as to why they were left off the list. And I wanted to put that in every video. And me and Ja did that for every video as we split them up evenly or close to it because it was an odd number. So, but Yao Ming, for example, the one negative mainly was his injuries and his lack of a long career.
Yeah.
But Yao Ming, of course, he was very influential in the game of basketball and specifically in the NBA for help globalizing the NBA and popularizing around the world with China and with all the international influence and international growth. So that was the main reason why he was on the list. A guy like Tony Parker.
Yeah. Go on.
Yeah, a guy like Tony Parker, also some international influence, as well as the skill and what he did for the Spurs, being a part of that legendary dynasty. And that legendary dynasty does not happen without him. He was the second best player on the Spurs behind one of the greatest players of all time, Tim Duncan, as well as being a Finals MVP. So that his career accolades really helped him get on this list.
Exactly. And I say this, doing this list and going over the players that we went over and stuff like that and studying them, you could kind of see there's always a constant common pattern with the main reasons to why he was never on the list. It was either always injury, being overshadowed by other talents within their time, or just wrong era, wrong time period or whatsoever, or just the history of a certain franchise. All the patterns are similar, or just like what you said, the lack of longevity. You know what I mean? The lack of having a long career compared to others. Like, for example, Sidney Moncrief, one of the best two-way players ever in the game, is the main reason to why the Bucks had the third best win percentage in the 80s out of all teams. Mind you, we're talking about an era dominated by the Celtics and the Lakers. But yeah, right behind it, you got a great team in the Sixers and the Pistons, who started winning later in the decade. But yet they got the third best over those two teams I just said. But again, nobody knows that because of how the era was. You know what I mean? So it's like common patterns. It's like, all these players and things, they legit have so many similarities behind them. They're obviously it's different for each and every one, but there's similarities into it also to what plays a factor in why they wasn't on the 75 list.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. And maybe some of their off-court antics or how people view them left them off the list. Like, for example, Kyrie's an excellent one. Yeah. How people view his off-court personality, and he's not very liked by the media.
Yeah.
So maybe that could play into a part in why he was left off the list, when You know, he has the stats, he has some of the accolades. He's an NBA champion, a key part in that NBA championship run. You know, he's made some clutch plays in one of the biggest shots in NBA history. You know, but him and his persona off the court probably influenced it, just like Dwight Howard and a lot of the stuff that happened in his career and how he was viewed with, you know, the Lakers, Rockets, and how he bounced around from team and how he was a good guy on the court and a good guy off the court, which you're not really supposed to be when you're that dominant like he was. And so that also probably played into a part with him. And that's one of the main reasons for Dwight. That's why he was our first entry. He was the first person that came to mind immediately for both of us. We immediately said Dory Howard. He was the first person on our list because we just thought that it was kind of insane that he wasn't there. And even though we didn't want to push that in there, like he should be on the list, it's kind of crazy when you look at everything that he did. It's like, really, he's not there.
He was the top center in the league since his third season up until 2014. That's legit, like, you know, nearly a decade period. If you nearly a decade, it wasn't a decade, but it was nearly like a decade period from being the best big in the game and being the most dominant big in the game. Mind you, again, I understand with that Magic franchise, obviously there's popular players like Penny Hardaway, Shaquille O'Neal, and one of our Snub 25 players, Tracy Mcgrady. But I'm just like, like Orlando, like actually, like again, as great as it was with Shaq and Penny, of course, Orlando saw a whole lot more success with Dwight as their main guy. And I feel like he's the reason why the franchise is still highly relevant now. He's their main reason. He has a lot to do with their success in their era. He defeated LeBron. He's the reason why there was no LeBron James, Kobe Bryant finals. Let's just put that in there too. And he legit fits all the criteria and boxes. Put it simply, I'm sorry to say, out of everybody on our Snub 25 list, he's shine legit been on the list. Like there's no, like, I'm sorry to say it. I don't want to say it. I don't want to take anybody off, but you added somebody, so you could add another person on the 75 list. But like, he shine legit been there. There shouldn't been question. That was the highest disrespect out of all the players in the history of the game, I feel like.
Yeah. And another guy, or two guys, Vince Carter and Tracy Mcgrady, are the ones that you did. I mean, they did a lot when they played as well with their Vince Carter's high flying, dunking ability, viewed as possibly the greatest dunker of all time. And then he was just an elite scorer. He put a whole country on the map in the NBA. Exactly. He did a lot for the league, and he's not there. Tracy Mcgrady, you want to talk about? If there was a top 75 for skill, he'll probably be in the top 10.
He will be in the top 10. It's not he will be in the top 10.
Yeah, so that's just his skill set and what he did in Orlando and what he did in Houston. And of course, some injuries played a part. And of course, his playoff lack of success probably held him down too. But if you want to just look at eye sets and his stats fit the fold as well, he had a case.
Yeah. And that's why I say when I look, okay, so when I think of Vince Carter, right? It's like this man, again, I said it in the video, and by all accounts, obviously, I saw all the evidence. All the other players even said it who played with him. All his peers in his generation said it. He's the most gifted athlete they ever seen. One of the most like God-blessed athletes and basketball players they ever seen for sure. From a man who could do what he do from high flying to what he could do when he's not in the air in terms of skill set and ability, he was gifted. But I feel like with him, due to everything else, like again, he was in the early years of Toronto. Like basketball in Canada was really not talked about. Again, and when you have two losing franchises in Vancouver, which is now Memphis and stuff like that, you legit have to, let me tell you something. The Raptors would not be around without Vince Carter. So that shine gave him a higher case. I'm surprised it didn't. But I feel like also when you look at Vince, it's just like, the pairs that he played against kind of overshadowed him in a way. Like, you know what I mean? Like that's when I look back at it, so because you're talking about era again, Kobe, AI, T-Mac, Steve Nash, even the big guys, Tim Duncan, Kevin Garnett, like all those guys who are made, Ray Allen, all those guys who were highly talented and highly great during the same era as him has had some major transformative type of success that everybody will recognize, and hence why they are on the list. Even his own teammate, Jason Kidd. Don't get me wrong, and also don't get me wrong, but and also it has to play a factor in which the teams that he was on, like they were great. Don't get me wrong, they were great, but there was always that one team that was just always better than them, and it's unfortunate, but but sometimes things like that are out of your control, it's out of your circumstance,
Yeah.
Yeah, but now when I look at T-Mac, it's more like, again, what you said, he was unlucky, in which, he he feels like he's going into a situation which is perfect for him to show off his talents while also have the opportunity to gain success. Thanks a lot, Doc. And also with the fact that the injuries come into a play, it's just like the unfortunate circumstances just got in his way at the wrong moment. If that makes sense, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Again, he was like right next to Kobe. He's legit Kobe. And he was right next to Kobe as arguably the best player in the world, especially individual player one-on-one in the world. But yet, unlike Kobe, he was not blessed with the right circumstances in the right time. And somebody, his mentality sometimes, but yeah.
And you mentioned T-Mac and injuries, and that him and a lot with other players played a part in probably why they didn't get on the list, because their career probably could have been better if those injuries happened. You mentioned T-Mac. I already mentioned Yao Ming. You had Bernard King, of course, he was one of the big ones. Obviously, he had the impact and influence playing in the bright lights of New York City and being a star in New York City, a attraction that people came to see. But unfortunately, his prime didn't last as long because of those injuries. Even though he did a lot to bounce back from that with the Bullets, and injuries sometimes. And Alonzo Mourning is another one. The injuries, the kidney disease that he suffered in the 2000s that held him back in the 2000s, which he probably would have dominated, being most likely the second best center in the league behind Shaq, because around the 2000s, that's when a lot of the centers started to really exit. No more Pat Ewing, no more Hakeem, no more David Robinson. And he would have stepped up to the plate, I believe, because he was already heading in that direction. 99, he was second in MVP voting behind Karl Malone.
Yeah.
And so he would have been right there.
And again, obviously, yeah. And when you would talk about specifically centers, I was like, I know we talk about bigs, and I know, we had an argument a little bit about Tim Duncan and Kevin Garnett, how they could be interchangeable in terms of the power forward and center position, stuff like that. But when you look at it, to be honest, when you look at that time, Shaq was legit the best big in the game, and anybody else kind of been right below him. And I feel like Lonzo Mourning was perfect to be that second best center in the league. You know what I mean? Like, I don't feel like there was any other center I could think of that comes to mind that would have been better than him. Just only Shaq.
Yeah, but injuries obviously played a big part in a lot of these teams, and why a lot of these players, and why most likely they were left off the list, because looking back at player career, if they didn't get hurt, most likely they probably would have made this list. And of course, you had the guys that made really a franchise what it is today. Vince Carter already mentioned, he puts Toronto on the map. He's one of those guys that really helped them. It really helped a franchise. Pau Gasol, Memphis was terrible. And then he comes and he gets them to their first playoff appearance. And not only their first playoff appearance, they made three straight playoff appearances with Pau Gasol. So he was one of those guys. I'm looking here. I would say Alex English, but they kind of had David Thompson in Denver.
Yeah, but that's more still in their ABA years. Like, again, they keep going in the NBA, but
true.
Yeah, so Alex English actually does have a lot of a point to be a part of that reason too, in terms of that. But also with Alex English, along with certain other players, I feel like since who they are, like, we said a lot, who they are as individuals on and off the court, not really being controversial or anything, there wasn't that much attention to their name. Again, with Alex though too, is probably because of the 80s and what it's about. But if you look at people like Alex English, Adrian Dantley, Bob Lanier, and Dennis Johnson, Adrian Dantley had like controversy towards the end because of who he was, but these guys didn't really have any kind of crazy controversial things to their name, but yet they didn't get much media attention either.
Joe Dumars.
Joe Dumars, exactly. And like, also Walt Bellamy, again, the 60s, like, there's no freaking media attention really in the 60s. Like, that's extreme.
Unless you was Wilt or Bill.
Exactly. Unless if you were Wilt Chamberlain or Bill Russell, you're not getting that much media, or Elgin Baylor or Jerry West, you're not getting that much media attention. You got to be at least one of the top 5 best players in the world in order to get media attention at that time.
Or play in New York City.
Yes. But and again, you need to think about the times too, in which, again, this is the 60s, American football is still at the top, stuff like that. People are more focused on that. Probably soccer at that point too still. Like, basketball wasn't really like a common phenomenon than how it is today. So as a result, you expect somebody as great as Walt Bellamy is to still get not really talked about much because basketball is not the main focus at that time.
Oh yeah, 100%. And Walt Bellamy is one of those underrated players that were on this list. This list has a list of underrated players and overlooked players that really didn't get their time in the limelight. One guy in particular, like Dennis Johnson, and I've seen a lot of comments on TikTok on our most highest viewed video, which is Dennis Johnson one, that people was like, he was really good, but he not deserving of the top 75 list. But the reason why he's on this list is because he's also one of those players that helped build up a franchise. Seattle, he helped them get that only championship that they ever got. He was the finals MVP for that one championship that they have. And yes, he did have help. He had players, Jack Sigma, Gus Williams. They were good, but he was the best player on that team. He was an elite defender. He's one of the best guard defenders of all time.
When you said 7 blocks in a finals game, that was crazy. I was like, I would probably hear from a big man, but not no guard.
Yeah, and he's on, if you look on the top blocks list of all time in the finals in a game, all you see is big men, power forward, center, power forward, center, power forward, center, and then you see Dennis Johnson. Yeah. Dennis Johnson is what, 6'3"?
6'3", 6'4".
Yeah, 6'3", 6'4", and a point guard, and he was just blocking everything. He was an elite, all-time great defender, and he was good at everything else. He's one of those players that was really, he can rebound, he can pass, he can score. He's a good jump shooter. He couldn't really shoot the 3 ball, but when he did in the 80s, he was good at it, and he fit his role. I mean, once he got to Boston, he was a key part in getting them those championships. The minute he got there, they went to the finals.
Yeah. Hell yeah. No question. And it's crazy because he should get a lot of credit for that, because I don't think, again, it was during the 70s, so that's probably the reason why. But he should get way more credit for that than how he gets. He should get just as much and probably a little bit more credit for that than he does his Celtics days. Larry Bird said he's one of the best players he's ever played with.
No, Larry Bird said he is the best player he played with.
Okay. You see that, and that goes to show you. So if he's saying that, just think about how it probably was before then and stuff like that, when he was still helping carry teams deep into playoffs and stuff like that. He should get a whole lot more credit for his impact from that standpoint than what he always gets for Boston, in my opinion. I'll say that about him. And other players that I would like to talk about who had a lot to do with the influence of how the game is played today, in my opinion, I look at 2 people on this list who I did, Chris Webber and Grant Hill. Chris Webber is basically one of the main reasons why bigs play the way they do. Probably not shooting from the perimeter, but in terms of handling the basketball, passing it, and wanting to be like a guard, he's one of the main reasons to it. It's just that, unfortunately, when you play for Sacramento, which he put them on the map, let's just get that out the way. That's one. In which he nearly led them to success. Let's just be honest. If it wasn't some shady stuff going on in the NBA, but he's the reason to why a lot of these players, but yet he doesn't get talked about because of the fact of, again, overshadowed by the talent of his time and the fact that injuries kind of derailed him, because the Kings still had 2 to 3 years more of success to try to show something, but then he got injured and it ruined everything at that point. Then you talk about Grant Hill, who basically was, again, how players play today, and he was LeBron before LeBron. Don't make the fact that LeBron's muscle fool you. Trust and believe. Grant Hill was doing the same thing he was doing. And he was doing it during the time in which their hand checking, defense was more tough, more physical and stuff like that. He was holding his own. But yet his prime was only for 7 straight years, all in the 90s. And by the time he could have showed more, he was already injured. So it kind of stopped him from that point on. But these are guys that, like, you know, you look at and they're the reasons to why the game is played the way they do, but yet we don't know much about them. People don't talk about them because of whatever it was. They're not really talked about in the limelight as much. Like, the only way I feel like most people around our age, the only reason why we probably know about Grant Hill is because of NBA TV, him being a color commentator.
Yeah, which is just crazy to think. Also, he's one of obviously those other players in the injury category, which really stunted their career. Okay, now I feel like we brushed upon a lot of list members. You know, okay, real quickly. And so there's players on this list too that are really not known for scoring, but strictly defense that I feel like should be in that discussion for the top 75. Because obviously they have Dennis Rodman in there. He's not a scorer. And of course, you know, Dennis Rodman, he has character, he has personality, played with the Chicago Bulls in the late 90s, played with Jordan and Pippen, won 3 chips. You know, but there are other players that are just or was just as great or just slightly underneath him in terms of their abilities. Ben Wallace is one of them, an undersized big man, just like Dennis Rodman was. That was a great rebounder and a great shot blocker, one of the best shot blockers of all time, and really helped the Pistons win the championship in 2004.
Yeah.
And he's one of them. Dikembe Mutombo, arguably the greatest shot blocker of all time. You know, he's made it famous to shot block and to be a shot blocker. He made it popular to play defense and, you know, swat the ball and the finger rag iconic move that is seen in sports, not just basketball, but it's seen in sports. So I feel like I wanted to really recognize them. That even though they were not elite scorers, even though they're technically weren't the best player on their team in some aspects, they were really good at what they did, and they should get recognized for the top 75 because they did it at an elite level.
Exactly. And I feel like a person, even though they don't fit this category or anything, a person who it goes to overshadow, but this because of the franchise specifically. I feel like somebody who on this list who I forgot to mention is Jojo White. You know, you talk about the Boston Celtics and their franchise history, and like, you know, that's a whole lot of legendary success that they happened. And yet, again, unfortunately, he's stuck in the era of bad situation in terms of the NBA in the 70s, but he's stuck between two of the greatest eras in Celtics history. 60s, which they dominated, in the 80s, which they're one of the main reasons why the NBA is on a national scale. So, you know, he gets overshadowed because he legit also fits everything. He's a champion. He has the accolades individually, but yet, even though he was a crazy scorer, he could score, he could play, he had all the skill set, but yet, again, he's just in that mold in which he's overshadowed by the rest of the many great Celtics players that play for the franchise and stuff like that.
Yeah, Jojo White is kind of those people that got hit twice with kind of bad luck between him being in the 70s and him just playing with the Celtics. But all right, now let's get to there were some players that didn't make this list. You know, and there was one player that wasn't going to make this list, Artist Gilmore, which I mentioned in the video, but I had to argue with Jadim and tell him, like, Artist Gilmore, you know, he did a lot in the league. I think we should recognize that's why there's 27 players. There's got to be 26.
Yeah.
With Artist Gilmore. But now the people that are left off the list, it's just a group of around 8 guys that were close, but when we did our research and really thought about it, we're like, nah, I don't think we should make this list. And those are Tim Hardaway, Chauncey Billups, George McGinnis, Gail Goodrich, Lamarcus Aldridge, Blake Griffin, Lou Hudson, Paul Westball. And probably one more I would throw in there is Derrick Rose.
Yeah, you got to throw Derrick Rose in there.
The snubs of the snubs.
Yeah.
And, you know, when I was looking at it, Tim Hardaway was one of those guys where He was close. He was one of the first people that I thought of
Mhm.
when the 75 list came out. Like, oh, Tim Hardaway could be a snub. He's one of those pioneers of the crossover, especially in the 90s. Crossover wasn't that, and not everybody was doing it, but he was one of those guys that really kind of took it to another level with his dribbling ability and ball handling ability. And he was a great scorer. He can shoot. Him and Alonzo Mourning really put the Heat on the map with their duo in the late 90s. And him and Run TMC, Chris Mullin, who was on this list, and Mitch Richmond. That's why we thought about him. But then when we look at the stats and when we look at his accolades, it didn't hold up.
Yeah. It just didn't. And don't get me wrong, he has an impact on why the game is played the way it is today in terms of ball handling and stuff like that. But
yes,
in terms of the others, when you compare their careers to his, stuff like that, because sometimes you do have to compare. Sometimes is you don't want to compare.
Yeah.
Sometimes it holds weight because it sees the impact of this person compared to player B, and it's just as great as he was during his time, it just didn't hold up enough.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Chauncey Billups was another one, of course, Finals MVP. One of those leaders of those Pistons teams in the 2000s that constantly was in championship contention. Made 2 finals, made 5 straight Eastern Conference Finals.
Yeah, I believe so. Yes.
So but looking at his stats, Mr. Big Shot, of course, clutch playoff performer. One of the reasons why the Nuggets made it to the conference finals and the only time Melo ever made it to the conference finals.
Yeah.
But again, his stats, it didn't hold up, and his impact in the league necessarily didn't hold up.
Yeah, because with him too, it's also like his career kind of bloomed late. Like I believe he was drafted in like 97, 98, and it took legit 6-7 seasons before he was able to.
It was with KG.
Don't do that. Yo, don't do that, man.
What happened? He was with KG. What happened?
Oh, well, yeah. When it's just KG and him and nobody else, then what else you expect to do? What, Latrella and Sam Cassell didn't come yet, bro? Like,
I'm not gonna say anything. Keep going.
Wally Zerbiak, I guess.
Keep going.
But like with Chauncey Billups, it's like a late bloom, and then he had a good great run after that, but then it was just not enough, in my opinion. Even though that championship should give him way more than what people actually think, but it's just not enough.
George McGinnis, lefty LeBron, from the 70s. LeBron be having a lot of comparisons. George McGinnis, Grant Hill. George McGinnis was one of those guys, skilled players. Was really great with the Sixers in the NBA. But unfortunately, and this is why Artis Gilmore was almost left off the list, was that his prime was the ABA.
Yeah.
And this weighed more for George McGinnis because his prime was really mainly in the ABA. Like, he was a mega star in the ABA. He got to the NBA, it was past it. He was still a great player and still cost Sixers the championship. But he really didn't do enough in the NBA for him to be on an NBA top 75 list.
Exactly.
Yeah. And Artis Gilmore was on this list, the Subs list, because his prime was the ABA, but his prime kind of stretched over to the NBA as well. And he played a good amount in the NBA. Yeah. Gail Goodrich, the 3rd star of the Los Angeles Lakers for the 60s and 70s.
Yeah, mainly the 70s, but the 60s and the 70s.
Yeah. Right behind Jerry West, right behind Elgin Baylor, then, of course, Will Chamberlain. Of course, he, once again, it just wasn't enough with Gail Goodrich.
Yeah.
Great player, serves on the top Lakers team, the top 30 Lakers players of all time. But, not enough for 75. Aldridge was close because of his years dominating in Portland, arguably being the best power forward in the league.
Yeah.
Debate him, K-Love. K-Love probably could have been on the snub list. And Blake Griffin. Of course, his skilled moves and him being one of the last of the dying breed of the post scoring.
Yeah.
Of course, now it's making a little bit of comeback nowadays. But in that mid to 2010s, in the early 2010s, man, a lot of big men were still posting up, but he was still doing it. He was still fishing with it. He was still scoring, and he was still elite at it.
Yeah.
So that's why he was a multiple-time All-Star as well.
Yeah. We talk about Lamarcus Aldridge and Blake Griffin. I want to be honest, I said you probably would disagree with this, but I feel like Kevin Love somewhat could get a mention on being on the Snub 25 too. Because you talk about the fact that even though it wasn't that long, he still had great years.
Yeah, that's why we didn't put him. Yeah.
And also you gotta leave the fact that just like somebody else who was on our Snub 25 list, Chris Bosh, he went to go play with LeBron and he sacrificed a lot, but he was also a big help for the reason of that championship team, along with because of his play style, his ability to stretch the floor out and spread the floor as a big, and also his defense and stuff like that, and it got them a chip. So he has a case. He doesn't have an extreme case, but he has a case.
The only reason why Kevin Love wasn't mentioned is because, yeah, he was a beast in Minnesota. But that window is small, and the significance of it wasn't as big. Like Sidney Moncrief's window was small too. He really had a 4-year prime. But what he did with the Bucks and what he did in the 80s was significant enough for him, we feel like him being on the list. Kevin Love being in Tough West Conference, being with the Minnesota Timberwolves wasn't significant enough.
Yeah.
But Blake Griffin, another one, Lob City, one of the best dunkers of all time, high flyer, one of the most entertaining players we've ever seen with his dunking ability, kind of like upgraded version of Shawn Kemp with his athleticism, kind of, and then he expanded his game with his passing, rebounding, scoring, and a little bit of his defending and his ball handling. Yeah. But fortunately, his success and all that didn't mount up for us to feel like he should be on the list.
Yeah, and he was always injured too. So
another player, Lou Hudson, who was a late one in our minds that I just remembered, right? Or did you remember?
I think it was you, I believe.
Yeah. Him being with Pistol Pete with the Atlanta Hawks.
Yeah.
Yeah, in the 70s. Then doing our research, he's like, nah, he didn't do enough. Prime wasn't long enough. Didn't have enough accolades, all that kind of stuff.
He had the stats. That's one thing for sure. He was one of the great scorers within the 70s. He had the stats and stuff like that. But when you look at the fact that, again, he's in the early years of Atlanta, because Atlanta, like the Hawks was around, they were just in St. Louis. But then he went to Atlanta and, like, you know what I mean? There was no extreme success for him whatsoever. He's being overshadowed. And again, he's playing in the NBA in the 70s. It just wasn't enough for him.
Speaking of NBA in the 70s, one of the biggest stars in the NBA in the 70s was Paul Westphal, someone who can score with his right hand and left hand. One of the first few, kind of like ambidextrous and you said it. Players in the NBA, and someone who was kind of sneaky athletic as well, and was a great ball handler, and he could shoot. He was a star of the Phoenix Suns. A big part in that historic Celtics Suns finals, 76. Sorry, 76. One of those big contributors to that Suns team. Of course, there was the greatest game of all time, greatest game played, the Game 5 triple overtime game. Yeah. But once again, his prime didn't last as long. He got hurt as well. And didn't help that he played in the 70s, the dark ages, that really killed a lot of players' career.
Yeah.
But those are all the snubs of the snubs. What?
If your name is not Kareem, or you don't have an impact like a Tiny Archibald or Pistol Pete, then you probably overlooked in the 70s. And Elvin Hayes. I forgot about Elvin Hayes. Sorry.
Yeah. It was untold, maybe.
Yeah, so maybe
there were stars in the 70s. It's just that they wasn't getting promoted or advertised or marketed as much, and people weren't watching it as much because of this situation and everything that was going on. But back to the actual 75 list. Like I said, we tried our best to not diminish anybody that was on the list. Really tried our best. I kind of came close with Dave Bing, but I made it to a point in that video, in the Ballinier video, because anyone who hasn't watched it first, go watch it. But second, Bob Lanier and Dave Bing were teammates in the 70s. They played for the Detroit Pistons. Bob Lanier was their best player. I don't think that should be debated. And he was their star and really helped them lead them into the playoff, some winnings, playoff series wins, playoff appearances, regular season 50-win seasons, and all that. And they weren't really doing that. Dave Bing was on the team for a few years. They didn't do any of that until Bob Lanier got there. And now I'm looking, Dave Bing's on the list. Bob Lanier isn't. And that just confused me, because how do you have the second best player on that team on the list, but not the best player?
Yeah.
But I was respectful, and I made sure not to say, take Dave Bing off the list. Dave Bing is undeserving of the list. I made sure to say, I made sure to say that Dave Bing was great, which he was. When I did research on him, he was a really good player. He does have stats to back it up. But how you going to have the second best player on the 75 list and not the best player? Not taking credit away from Dave Bing, not saying he should be off the list, but saying maybe they could both be on the list. Kind of pushing that narrative.
I hear what you're saying.
Well, yeah. No, I know, because you tried to come at me when I told you about it, and you was laughing at it the way I said it.
Nah, yeah, because I don't know.
But like I said, we just tried to. We didn't. I know and there's a lot of people in comments on our TikTok saying, talking about people that shouldn't be on the list, which is fine. This is what it's supposed to do. It's for y'all to take people off the list and for y'all to add on to our list based off our snubs list. It's like, people saying Damian Lillard shouldn't be on the list and Davis shouldn't be on the list. I saw Melo shouldn't be on the list. There was a few players that I saw that shouldn't be on the list based off what people were saying.
Yeah, I hear you. But and we had that same thing. I wasn't saying Melo's on the list, but looking back at it, I say AD deserves to be on the list, obviously, because of what he did for that Pelicans franchise by himself, and along with the fact that he ended up going to the Lakers and seeing major success and was a big piece to why they got a chip. So I leave AD on that list for sure. But Damian, no disrespect to Dame, and you know how much I love Dame.
And we can just, hey, yeah.
I'm just saying. Just remember Dwight. What like Dwight? That's all I gotta say. Dwight.
Yeah. But as for closing of this snubs list, it was a lot of fun. Researching and just looking up all these players and looking up highlights of all these players and the stats and the accolades really puts into perspective like how great either generation before us was, or just reminding us of how great these players playing now are. Just like when we, because Paul George, Kyrie, and Klay Thompson are all modern day players that still playing the game today that we felt have a case to be on the 75 list.
Yeah.
Klay Thompson with the 77 jersey. So, but it really puts perspective all the great scorers that came, Alex English and Adrian Dantley, the great defenders of Ben Wallace and Dikembe Mutombo, the great big men, Yao Ming and Alonzo Mourning, great foreign players, Tony Parker, Manu Ginobili. It really puts into perspective everybody that came before, all the great legends that some have forgotten, some have been overlooked, some that were underrated, and some that just get noticed more.
Yeah. Like, again, cultural impact players like Vince Carter, T-Mac, and Yao Ming.
Yeah.
I can tell you, I had a lot of fun doing this list also, and it reminded me of one thing, that Golden State had a snake.
I don't know what that had to do with that.
They had a snake.
I don't know what that
injured this season.
I don't know what that had to do with the subs list, but yeah. But like I said, it was a lot of fun doing this list. I want y'all to let us know if we should do more lists like this. What should be our next list? We are still thinking about what we should do next.
Yeah.
But like I said earlier in this video, I like to thank everybody that supported. This has really helped us really love all support and appreciate all the support. We appreciate the comments, appreciate the likes, appreciate all the new followers that joined. And it's really helped us to enjoy it more, noticing that people are enjoying it. Because when you're doing something and you might enjoy it, but then people watching, people viewers clearly have a disconnect and don't really enjoy it that much, it doesn't make you enjoy it the same level. But when there's people that are enjoying it, it really helps you to, oh, I gotta do this more now. Oh, people are clearly liking it. Okay. Now I can work with this. Now I can do more. Now I can do this, that, blah, blah, blah. So any support that is given to us within the past 2 months, we've loved and we appreciate it. And we thank all of you. And Johnny, final thoughts?
Oh, yeah, we had a lot of fun. It was great. Thank you for tuning in, and thank you for appreciating and giving us a lot of insight on our Snub 25 list, like when we eventually put it out on TikTok and stuff like that. And I really enjoyed it.
So thank you to all the YouTube people who watched it. Thank you to all the TikTok followers that watched it, commented, all of that. Appreciate all the love. But for now, thank you guys for watching today's special podcast. Oh yeah. Make sure you follow on TikTok. Make sure you subscribe on YouTube. Make sure you like, comment, support the channel, feedback, all that good stuff.
Yeah, and also, already know he said it.
Yeah, I pretty much said it. Sorry, I kind of stepped on your outro, but
it's cool. You did it better than me, anyways.
But once again, and closing for our Snub 25 list, top 75 snubs. I am Evan.
I am Ja.
And this was the Mind of Basketball podcast.
Special edition, Snub 25 / top 75 snubs list.
And of course, what season?
Number 2.